I've never been good with directions. Give me a straight road, no turns, no surprises, and I'll still find a way to get lost. That's exactly what happened last December, when I was driving through a snowstorm, trying to make it home before nightfall. The highway had already disappeared under a thick sheet of white, and my GPS had been useless for the past hour. My only guide was the faint glow of my headlights against the swirling snow. The silence inside my car felt suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic thunk-thunk of the windshield wipers struggling against the ice. Then, through the chaos of the storm, I saw something. A cabin. It stood alone on the side of the road, its windows dark, its roof weighed down by layers of untouched snow. More importantly, just a few feet away from it, I saw footprints. Someone had walked through the storm, their tracks fresh and clear, leading straight toward the cabin's front door. Relief flooded through me. Maybe someone was inside. Maybe they had a working phone, or at least a place where I could wait out the worst of the storm. I pulled over, my tires crunching against the snow, and grabbed my coat. The air was bitter, cutting through my layers like a knife. The footprints were deep, pressed into the fresh snow. Whoever made them had passed through only minutes ago. But as I followed them toward the cabin, something felt wrong. I stopped a few feet from the door, my breath fogging in front of me. The footprints ended, right there in the middle of the snow. No more steps forward, no signs of turning back, just a single trail of footprints leading to nothing. I stared, my pulse hammering. Maybe the wind had erased the rest, but the storm wasn't strong enough for that. Hell, my own footprints were still clear behind me. The snow around me was untouched. No sign of anyone falling, crawling, or turning back. Just gone. I swallowed hard and glanced at the cabin. The windows were still dark. No movement inside and no light. I should have left. Gotten back in my car and forced my way through the storm. But something in me, the part that refuses to accept the impossible, needed an answer. Maybe they'd jumped. Maybe they'd climbed onto the porch. Maybe. I knocked. The sound was swallowed by the storm. No answer. I reached for the doorknob and twisted. Unlocked. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty interior. My breath caught as I stepped inside, shaking the snow off my boots. The air was stale, carrying the scent of old wood and something metallic beneath it. The first thing I noticed was the dust. Thick, untouched, covering the wooden floor like a blanket. The second thing I noticed, there were no footprints inside. My stomach twisted. If someone had walked into this cabin, their footprints should be here. The floor was coated in dust. Even my own steps left behind clear marks. But aside from those, the place was pristine, undisturbed. I took a shaky breath and scanned the room. A small fireplace, a wooden table, a few chairs. Everything was old, abandoned looking. Then, on the far wall, I saw it. A single framed photograph. I don't know why I walked toward it. Something about it felt wrong before I even saw the details. It was black and white, yellowed with age. A man stood in front of this very same cabin, bundled in a heavy coat. His face was blank, blurred, like the camera had caught him mid-movement. I leaned in closer. The snow beneath him was untouched. No footprints. A sudden creak behind me. I spun around, my pulse spiking. The door was still open, swinging slightly in the wind. The storm outside had thickened, making it impossible to see beyond the first few feet. Then, in the snow, just outside the doorway, I saw them. More footprints. They hadn't been there before, and they weren't leading to the cabin. They were leading from it, straight to my car. My stomach dropped. A coldness that had nothing to do with the storm spread through me. I wasn't alone. I bolted for the door, stumbling back into the snow, following the new set of footprints with shaking steps. They were deep, freshly pressed, and they led directly to the driver's side of my car. The door was open. The engine was running. The air inside was warm, fogging the windows. I hadn't left it like that. I know I hadn't left it like that. Slowly, I stepped closer, my breath shuddering. My headlights barely cut through the white abyss beyond the road. I could see inside the car now. The driver's seat was empty, but there was something in the rearview mirror. A blurred figure sitting in the back seat, watching me. I ran. I don't know where, I just ran. The storm swallowed me whole, freezing my lungs, biting my skin. I ran until my legs gave out, until my vision blurred, until I collapsed face first into the snow. And then, nothing. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. A snowplow driver found me unconscious on the side of the road, hypothermic but alive. They never found my car, or the cabin, or any footprints. But when they handed me the clothes I had been wearing that night, my jacket felt heavier than it should. I reached into the pocket with stiff fingers, feeling something smooth, something old. I pulled it out. A framed photograph, a black and white picture of a man standing in the snow. His face this time wasn't blurred, it was mine. Snowstorms never used to scare me. I grew up in the Midwest, where whiteout conditions and sub-zero nights were just another part of life. But after what happened last winter, I don't think I'll ever be able to look at falling snow the same way again. It started on the night I agreed to house-sit for my friend Mark. He and his wife were spending the holidays in Florida, and they needed someone to check in on their place, a secluded little cabin at the edge of the forest, miles away from the nearest town. I know it's kind of out there, Mark had told me with an awkward chuckle, but hey, you'll have peace and quiet. Just keep the fire going, and you'll be fine. I should have said no. That night, the snowstorm hit harder than I expected. By midnight, the wind was howling like a living thing, rattling the windows and burying the world outside in endless white. I curled up on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, staring at the flames in the fireplace. The power had gone out hours ago. My phone had no service. The only sound in the cabin was the crackling of burning wood. Until I heard it. A knock. Slow. Deliberate. It came from the front door. I froze, my breath hitching. No one should have been out there. Not in this storm. Knock. 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 I swallowed hard and stood up, moving toward the door with careful steps. The cabin had no peephole, but the windows beside the door gave me a partial view of the porch. I reached for the curtain, hesitated, then pulled it back. The porch was empty. The snow outside was thick, untouched, except for a single set of footprints leading up to the door. No footprints leading away. The hair on my arms stood on end. My gut screamed at me to ignore it, to lock the door and pretend I hadn't heard a thing. But before I could step away, knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. My heart pounded. I forced myself to look again, peering through the frost-covered glass. The footprints were still there, but something else had changed. The door handle was coated in frost, like someone had been gripping it. I backed away slowly, pulse hammering in my ears. My breath fogged in the freezing air. I wasn't imagining it. The temperature inside the cabin was dropping, fast. Then, from behind me, a whisper. My whole body locked up. It was soft, almost inaudible, threading through the air like a draft. Let me in. I spun around, but the cabin was empty. The fire had burned down to embers, barely glowing. My breath curled in front of me, the temperature now well below freezing. Then I heard it. The door unlocking. Not the sound of someone turning the knob. No, it was the slow, deliberate click of the deadbolt sliding back. I lunged forward, grabbing the handle, forcing it shut just as a wave of freezing air surged in from outside. My fingers went numb on contact, a biting cold seeping into my bones. I locked it, bolted it, shoved a chair against it. Then I listened. Nothing. No knocks, no whispers, no movement. I waited, heart pounding, until finally, after what felt like hours, I convinced myself it was over. Until I turned around. The cabin had only one window that faced the clearing outside, and standing there, just beyond the glass, was a figure, tall, thin, wrapped in rags. His face, I couldn't see his face. The snow distorted it, blurred it, like he wasn't fully there. He lifted a hand and pressed it against the glass. Frost bloomed where his fingers touched, creeping across the window pane like veins of ice. I ran. Didn't stop to think, didn't stop to grab anything. I burst through the back door, into the snow, into the storm. I don't remember how far I ran. I don't remember how long I was out there before I collapsed, half frozen in the middle of the road. I only remember waking up in the hospital, my body riddled with frostbite. The police found the cabin empty. The door was still bolted shut. No footprints outside, no sign that anyone had ever been there. But I know what I saw. And every time it snows now, I swear, I see him again, standing just beyond the frost-covered glass. I used to love winter, the way the snow blanketed the world, how everything felt still and peaceful. But after last December, I don't think I'll ever feel safe in a snowstorm again. It was the week before Christmas, and I was staying at my parents' old cabin, deep in the mountains of Montana. They had passed away a few years ago, and I hadn't been back since. The place was covered in dust, the fireplace unused, the windows sealed shut from years of neglect. A storm rolled in my first night there. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the roof, making the whole cabin creak like an old ship at sea. I should have been uneasy, alone in that house with no neighbors for miles, but I wasn't. At least, not until I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow. I froze in bed, my breath caught in my throat. The sound was steady, deliberate, someone walking outside. My first thought was a lost hiker. The storm had been brutal, and maybe someone had wandered too far. But then I remembered. There were no nearby trails, no roads leading up here, except the one I had driven on, and it had been buried under at least 3 feet of snow by now. I sat up slowly, the bed creaking beneath me. The footsteps stopped. I waited, listened. Nothing. I convinced myself I had imagined it, the wind playing tricks on me, but then, knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the front door. I felt my stomach drop. No one should have been out there. I hesitated before sliding out of bed, moving as quietly as possible. My pulse throbbed in my ears as I crept toward the living room, toward the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. I reached the door, heart hammering, and pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Then, a voice. Low, almost too quiet to hear, but there. Let me in. A chill ran down my spine. The voice was flat, emotionless, like someone imitating speech rather than actually speaking. I swallowed, gripping the handle. Who's there? Silence. I took a breath and, against every instinct in my body, I cracked the door open just an inch. The porch was empty, no footprints in the snow. The wind howled through the trees, but otherwise there was nothing. I slammed the door shut, bolting it. My hands were shaking. I backed away slowly, my eyes still locked on the door. Then, from behind me, knock, knock, knock. I spun around, my breath catching. The sound hadn't come from the front door this time. It had come from the back door. My legs felt like they would give out. My brain screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. The same voice spoke again. Let me in. I forced my legs to move, stumbling toward the back of the cabin. The kitchen door had a small window, fogged from the cold. I hesitated, then wiped the glass with my sleeve, peering out into the night. The backyard was empty. No tracks, no movement, no one. Then, from behind me, inside the house, knock, knock, knock. I turned so fast, I nearly fell. The sound had come from the bedroom door. My bedroom door. Someone was knocking from inside. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't possible. I had been alone all night. Knock, knock, knock. The doorknob twisted. I ran. I don't even remember grabbing my coat. I just remember tearing out the front door, into the storm, into the freezing cold. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing into the snow. And then, nothing. I woke up in a small clinic the next day, covered in blankets, my skin burning from frostbite. A local ranger had found me unconscious by the side of the road. They said I was lucky to be alive. I tried to explain what had happened, but they just gave me that look, the one you give someone when they're not making sense. When I finally got the strength to return to the cabin, I found everything as I had left it. The doors were locked. The floors were untouched, but on my bedroom door, there were 3 long, deep scratches, as if something had been inside with me that night, waiting. I've always loved snowstorms. There's something about the world going quiet, buried under a thick white blanket, that feels peaceful. Safe. At least, that's what I used to believe. Last winter changed that forever. I was driving home from visiting my sister when the storm hit. The roads had been bad all day, but by nightfall, visibility was nearly zero. Snow swirled in thick sheets, my headlights barely cutting through the whiteout. I had no choice but to pull over. I was in the middle of nowhere, just an empty stretch of road surrounded by dense forest. My phone had no service. The gas station I'd passed was miles back. And then, through the snow, I saw him. A man standing in the middle of the road. His clothes were all wrong. Thin, tattered rags, barely enough to protect against the brutal cold. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing my car, his posture stiff and unnatural. My stomach clenched. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the door handle. Something about him felt wrong. I turned on my high beams, and I swear to God, he didn't have a face. I gasped, my pulse hammering. But in the split second it took for me to blink, he was closer, 10 feet from my car, still standing motionless, still facing me. My hands fumbled for the gear shift. I had to get out of there. Then, bang! Something slammed against my back window. I screamed, twisting in my seat. The glass was covered in handprints, hundreds of them. Too many for just one person. I floored the gas. My tires spun, struggling against the snow. And then, finally, I lurched forward. The man in the road didn't move. He just watched as I sped past him, his empty face following me. I didn't stop. I drove for what felt like hours, not daring to look in my rearview mirror. Not until I finally saw the lights of a diner, glowing dimly through the blizzard. I pulled into the lot, my hands still trembling. Inside, it was warm, safe, full of normal people. The waitress gave me a concerned look as I sat down. "Bad storm out there, huh?" she said, pouring me coffee. I nodded, barely able to form words. "Yeah, there was a man in the road. I swallowed hard. I think he needed help." The waitress's face changed. She set the coffee pot down slowly. "You saw him?" My stomach twisted. "What?" She exchanged a look with the cook behind the counter. He shook his head. The waitress leaned in, her voice low. "Honey, that road's been closed for years. There haven't been houses out there since the fire." I felt ice crawl up my spine. "What fire?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Back in the 70s. A family lived up there. Their house burned down in the middle of a blizzard. They say the father went mad, killed his wife, his kids, then walked out into the storm." I felt my throat go dry, and she gave me a long, serious look. "And no one ever found his body." I didn't sleep that night. And when I finally worked up the courage to check my car the next morning, I found something in the back window, scratched into the frost. "Let me in!" There's something about a snowstorm that makes you feel completely isolated, like the rest of the world has been swallowed whole. That's how I felt last winter, trapped in my cabin with it. I had been staying at my uncle's old hunting cabin deep in the northern woods, far from any towns or people. I wanted the solitude, no distractions, no obligations, just a quiet winter getaway. The place was rustic with an old wood stove, dim lanterns, and a single radio for communication. The storm came fast, the wind howled through the trees, snow piled against the door, and by the second day, I knew I was completely snowed in. Still, I wasn't worried. I had enough food, enough wood to keep the cabin warm. I even found it peaceful until the scratching started. At first, I thought it was a tree branch against the roof. But when I checked, there were no trees close enough. The scratching continued that night, soft, deliberate, coming from just outside the cabin. I held my breath, staring at the door, waiting for it to stop, and then knock, knock, knock. I nearly dropped my lantern. I hadn't seen a soul for miles. No one should have been out there, not in this storm. I hesitated before stepping to the door. Hello? No answer. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Silence. Then, a whisper. So soft I almost didn't hear it. Let me in. I stumbled back. My pulse pounded in my ears. The voice had been wrong, not quite human. I reached for the shotgun my uncle had left behind. I wasn't planning to shoot, but I needed to feel in control. The whisper came again, right against the door this time. I see you. I felt cold, even with the fire roaring. Then, a shadow moved past the window. I barely caught a glimpse, but what I saw made my skin crawl. Not a person, too tall, too thin. Its limbs, wrong. I stayed awake all night, my shotgun in my lap, my eyes locked on the door. The scratching came and went, the wind howled, but nothing else happened. By morning, the storm had let up, and I finally worked up the courage to step outside. Fresh snow covered everything. No footprints. Nothing to show anyone or anything had been there at all. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it. Maybe the storm had played tricks on my mind. Maybe I had been alone too long. But then I saw the claw marks on my door. Long, deep scratches. And in the snow, directly beneath the window, was a message, written in long, jagged letters. See you soon. I left that cabin and never went back. But sometimes, when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls outside my bedroom window, I swear I still hear the scratching, waiting. Last winter, I took a job as a caretaker for a remote lodge up in the mountains. The owner only rented it out during the summer, so during the off-season, someone had to stay behind to make sure the pipes didn't freeze and the place didn't collapse under the weight of the snow. It sounded like the perfect job. Solitude, peace, and time to myself. But then, the faces started appearing. The first storm hit a few days after I arrived. It was brutal. Howling winds, thick sheets of snow piling against the lodge, making it impossible to see more than a few feet beyond the windows. I was stuck inside, just me in the empty rooms. On the second night of the storm, I woke up to a noise outside. A faint, crunching sound, like footsteps in the snow. I grabbed my flashlight and looked out the window. At first, I saw nothing but endless white. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I spotted something near the tree line. A face, half buried in the snow. My breath caught in my throat. It was pale, with hollow eyes and a frozen, twisted expression of terror. The snow had covered most of its body, leaving only the head and part of a shoulder visible. I scrambled to throw on my coat and boots, rushing outside. My mind raced. Had someone gotten lost in the storm? Were they still alive? But when I reached the spot, there was nothing there. No face, no body. Only smooth, untouched snow. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. Cabin fever. The isolation playing tricks on my mind. But then, that night, I saw another one. This time, it was pressed against the glass of my bedroom window. I nearly screamed, stumbling backward. The face was twisted in agony, its mouth open in a silent scream, its skin frost-bitten and pale. I scrambled for my flashlight, heart pounding. But when I turned it on, the face was gone. Just condensation on the glass. But in the frost, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. A handprint. I barely slept after that. Every night, I saw more faces. Some buried in the snow outside. Some staring at me through the windows. One night, I even saw them inside the lodge, watching from the dark corners of the room. Always frozen, always contorted in fear. I started hearing things too. The faint whisper of voices carried on the wind. Crying, pleading. I tried calling for help, but the radio was dead. My truck was buried under feet of snow. I was trapped. Then, on the seventh night, I heard the knocking. Slow, deliberate. From the front door. I grabbed a knife and approached cautiously. My breath came in shaky gasps. I reached for the doorknob, hesitated, and then the door burst open. A blinding gust of snow and wind rushed inside, knocking me backward. I scrambled to my feet, expecting to see anyone, but there was nothing, only the howling storm. Then I looked down, and in the snow leading inside the lodge were footprints, but they didn't lead back out. By morning, the storm had finally eased, and I dug my truck out as fast as I could. I didn't care about the job. I just wanted to leave. As I drove away, I made the mistake of glancing in the rearview mirror. Standing outside the lodge were dozens of figures, all staring at me, their faces frozen in silent screams. I never went back. And now, every winter, when the first heavy snow falls, I dream of them, of their hollow eyes, their open mouths, their twisted, frozen faces, waiting. Snowstorms never used to scare me. They were a childhood wonder, a sign of cozy nights by the fire, of school cancellations and hot chocolate. But after last winter, I can't see snow without feeling watched. Because that was the winter I met the man who follows the snow. The first sighting. It started on a night like any other. The first major storm of the season was rolling in, thick snowflakes swirling in the wind, blanketing my small town in white. I was home alone, my parents away on a trip, leaving me to watch the house. I didn't mind. I was 17, old enough to handle a quiet weekend alone. Besides, I loved winter. There was something peaceful about the way the snow muffled everything, how the world outside seemed to slow down. That night, I curled up on the couch with a movie, my phone resting beside me, occasionally buzzing with weather updates about worsening conditions. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but I barely paid attention. Until I got the notification. Motion detected. Front porch camera. I frowned. Who would be outside in this storm? Curious, I opened the security app and checked the feed. At first, I saw nothing. Just the swirling snow, the dim glow of the porch light barely illuminating the yard. The street was empty, my neighbor's house is dark. Everyone's smart enough to be inside. Then, movement. A figure just beyond the edge of the camera's range, standing perfectly still, watching the house. My stomach twisted. The figure wasn't moving, wasn't even shifting from foot to foot, like someone bracing against the cold. It was just there. I tapped the microphone, my voice shaking slightly. "Hey, who's there?" No response. Then, the figure moved closer. Not walking, not running, just gliding. I slammed the app shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maybe it was a trick of the snow. Maybe my tired eyes were playing games with me. Then, tap, tap, tap. I jumped. The sound came from the front window. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Through the frost-covered glass, I saw him. A tall, thin man in an old-fashioned black coat. His face was wrong. Stretched too long, his mouth hanging open in a frozen grin. His eyes, they were just holes. Dark, empty holes. And then he raised his hand. Not to knock, but to wave. I stumbled backward, scrambling for my phone, my fingers shaking too hard to dial 911. I looked back. He was gone. Only a single handprint remained, melted into the frost. The footprints in the snow. I barely slept that night. By morning, the storm had ended, and the figure was nowhere in sight. I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, maybe just the reflection of tree branches moving in the wind. But then I stepped outside, and I saw the footprints. They led from the middle of my yard to my front window. But here's the part that still makes my blood run cold. There were no footprints leading away. It was like he had just disappeared. The second night. I spent the rest of the day trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. I checked the cameras constantly, kept the curtains drawn, jumped at every little noise. I told myself it had just been a weird trick of the storm, but deep down, I didn't believe it. That night, just past midnight, my phone buzzed again. Motion detected. Back porch camera. I froze. Slowly, I picked up my phone and opened the app. This time, there was no hesitation. He was standing right there, just outside the sliding glass door. His grin was wider now, his hollow eyes fixed on the camera. He was closer than before. Too close. A scream lodged in my throat. My mind screamed at me to run, to do something. But then the screen glitched. The image distorted, lines running through the video feed, and when it cleared, he was gone. I bolted for the door, making sure it was locked. Then I checked every window, every entry point in the house. Nothing. But when I returned to my room, my phone buzzed again. Motion detected, bedroom window. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see, but I had to. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I slowly turned my head toward the window. The frost on the glass had started to melt in long, jagged streaks, like fingers had been pressed against it, like something had been there, watching me. The final visit. I didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, I was a wreck, pale, exhausted, and struggling to convince myself that I hadn't lost my mind. I tried calling my parents, but their phones went straight to voicemail. The storm must have knocked out reception where they were. That evening, my best friend Mark came over. He took one look at me and frowned. "Dude, you look like hell." I hesitated, then told him everything. The man, the security footage, the footprints. I expected him to laugh, but he didn't. Instead, he grabbed my phone. "Let's check the cameras," he said. I didn't want to, but I had to. The snow had started falling again by the time we checked the security feed. For the first few minutes, there was nothing. Just swirling snow, the darkened yard. Then, motion detected, front porch. My stomach dropped. The video feed flickered, and then he was there, closer than before. His face pressed against the camera, his grin wider than ever. Mark recoiled. What the hell? Then the camera feed cut out. Static. Darkness. A single word whispered over the speaker. Cold. The lights flickered. The temperature in the house plummeted. And then we heard the sound. Tap, tap, tap from the window. Mark and I ran. We spent the night at his house, too terrified to return. When I came back the next morning, the snow had covered all traces of footprints. But on my window in the frost, a message was written. "See you next winter." Now, every time it snows. I never saw him again after that. But every time the first snowfall of winter comes, I feel it. That creeping dread, that unshakable feeling of being watched. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear it. Tap, tap, tap. On my window. I don't look anymore, because I know that if I do, he'll be waving. I've lived in Montana my whole life, so I know snowstorms well. Out here they come in fast and mean, swallowing everything in white. But the one that hit last year, that one was different, because something came with it. A storm like no other. I work as a truck driver delivering supplies between small mountain towns. It's lonely work, but I don't mind. Gives me time to think. That night, I was hauling a load of construction materials to a remote site near the Canadian border. The storm had been forecast for days, but I figured I could beat it. I was wrong. By the time I hit the last stretch of highway, the snow was blinding. The road disappeared beneath my wheels, my headlights barely piercing the swirling white. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, my radio crackled. Static. That wasn't unusual in bad weather. But then I heard something else. A voice. It was faint, buried beneath the white noise. "Stop. Turn back." I frowned, adjusting the dial. "Dispatch? You're cutting out." The static screeched, and then laughter. Not normal laughter. This was low, wheezing, almost like someone struggling to breathe. Then, silence. The radio went completely dead. And that's when I saw it. Something ran across the road. Not a deer, not an animal. Something tall, thin, fast. I slammed the brakes, my truck skidding on the ice. The trailer lurched, threatening to jackknife, but I managed to regain control. My heart hammered as I scanned the road. Nothing, just endless, swirling snow. Had I imagined it? I took a shaky breath and pressed forward, but something in my gut told me I wasn't alone anymore. The shadow in the snow. 20 minutes later, I saw the cabin. It was a ranger station, one of the last outposts before the real wilderness took over. The lights were on, a warm, golden glow in the storm. I pulled up, deciding to wait out the blizzard. The wind howled as I stepped out of the cab, my boots sinking into the snow. The air felt wrong, too quiet despite the storm. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Hello? Anyone in there? Still nothing. I tried the handle. It swung open. The inside was warm, too warm. The fire in the wood stove roared, but no one was there. Then I saw the boots by the door, covered in snow, still wet. Like someone had just come in. A cold prickle ran down my spine. I turned and saw the window. At first I thought it was just the storm outside. But then the glass fogged up, like something was breathing against it. I didn't move, didn't blink. Then long, bony fingers pressed against the glass. Slowly, deliberately. I bolted for the door, but the wind slammed it shut. The fire flickered, and I heard it, a low, rasping breath. Right behind me. I turned. Nothing was there. But the boots? They were gone. The thing in the dark. I don't remember how long I stood there, too afraid to move. Then the wind stopped. Not died down, stopped. Like the storm had been cut off. I took a shaky breath and reached for my radio. Dispatch, this is Rig 7. Do you copy? Silence. Then, and that same wheezing laugh, right in my ear. I dropped the radio and ran. I didn't care about the truck, didn't care about the storm. I just ran. Through the snow, through the dark, and behind me, footsteps matching mine. But the thing was, they weren't sinking into the snow. It was following me. But it wasn't touching the ground. The last warning. I made it back to my truck, shaking, locked the doors, started the engine, and then, thud. Something landed on my trailer. The whole rig shook. I hit the gas, the wheels spinning before catching traction. The truck surged forward, barreling through the storm. In the mirrors, I saw it, a shape, crouched on the roof of my trailer. Its arms were too long, its mouth was too wide. And its eyes, God, its eyes, just black pits, swallowing the light. Then it spoke, not out loud. Inside my head, you shouldn't have stopped. The truck lurched, the weight vanishing. I didn't stop driving until I saw the lights of the next town. Now, when it snows, I quit trucking after that. Moved south, where it barely snows. But sometimes, late at night, I check the weather up north, and when I see a blizzard rolling in over that old highway, I wonder if it's out there, waiting for another trucker to stop, waiting for the next person to let it in. I never used to believe in ghosts, but after what happened that winter, I don't know what else to call them. I was working as a park ranger in northern Minnesota, stationed at a remote outpost near the Canadian border. The area was known for its brutal winters, but that year, the cold was different, deeper, more hungry, and something was waiting in it. The first disappearance. It started with a missing hiker, a man named Kevin Reese, an experienced outdoorsman. He set out on a solo trek 2 days before the storm hit. He never came back. We organized a search party. The snow was relentless, coming down in thick sheets. But we found his footprints leading off the trail. Then they stopped. No signs of a struggle. No animal tracks. Just nothing. Like he had vanished into thin air. And then we found the camp. A camp abandoned his tent, was still standing. The fire pit was cold, but the logs were half burned, like something had put them out mid-flame. Inside the tent, his jacket was still there. His gloves, his boots. No one just leaves their boots behind in this kind of weather. And worst of all, there were more footprints around the tent, not Kevin's. These were barefoot, and there were dozens of them. They circled the tent, moving in strange, erratic patterns. Some of them were deep, frozen into the ice. like whoever made them had been standing there for hours, watching, waiting. We called off the search when the storm worsened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone out there. The figures in the storm. That night, I was in my ranger cabin alone, trying to warm up by the fire. The wind howled outside, making the trees groan. Then, a knock. Software. Rhythmic. Like fingertips tapping the wood. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. Nothing. Just snow, falling in heavy silence. But when I shone the light out into the trees, I saw them. Figures. Standing just beyond the tree line. Not moving, not breathing, just standing. And even though they were far away, I could see it clearly. They weren't wearing any clothes, just pale, frozen skin. Their heads tilted at odd angles, and their eyes, God, their eyes were just black pits. I slammed the door, heart pounding, locked it, checked the windows. When I looked back out, they were closer. Frozen screams. I tried calling for backup, but the radio was dead. The power flickered. The fire in my wood stove started to die. The flames shrinking as if being suffocated. And then, the whispering. It came from all around me. Low, rasping voices just outside the cabin walls. I pressed my ear against the wood, trying to make sense of it. It sounded like Kevin. Help me! I almost opened the door. Almost. Then, the whispers turned to screams, not just one, dozens. And through the screaming, I heard something else. A sound like cracking ice, like bones breaking. I backed away, clutched my rifle, and then the window shattered. A hand shot through the glass. Blue, frost-bitten fingers, nails broken, jagged. It grabbed my arm, and it was so cold, it burned. I screamed, wrenching away, the skin on my arm going numb. Outside, the figures were closer, right at the porch. Their mouths were open now. But no sound came out, just empty black holes where their voices should have been. I grabbed my lantern, tossed it at the broken window, and lit the curtains on fire. The flames roared up, filling the cabin with heat. And outside, they shrank back. The wind screamed, and then they were gone. The ones who are taken. I left the next morning, didn't even pack. Just got in my truck and drove south until I saw sunlight again. The Park Service called it hypothermia-induced delusions. But they didn't see what I saw. Didn't feel them watching. Kevin was never found. And every winter when the blizzards roll in, I check the missing persons reports. People still vanish in that forest, and I know where they go. I know what they become. They freeze. They wander. And when the storm comes, they look for the next one to take. It started with the blizzard, a storm so fierce, so relentless, it felt like the sky itself was trying to bury the world beneath ice. I was a truck driver, hauling supplies across a remote highway in northern Wyoming, a stretch of road infamous for its brutal winters. That night, I was on my way to a small town that barely existed on the map. The snow had already begun to fall, thick and heavy, but I figured I could beat the worst of it if I kept moving. I was wrong. I stopped for gas at the last station before the long stretch of empty road ahead. It was one of those old, half-forgotten places. Flickering neon sign, a single pump, the kind of place you only stop at if you have no other choice. The attendant was an older man, bundled in layers, his eyes darting nervously toward the road. "You heading north?" he asked as I handed him my card. "Yeah," I said, trying to get ahead of the storm. He hesitated, then leaned in. "If you see something in the snow," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "don't stop. Don't slow down. Just keep driving." I let out a short laugh. "You mean like deer?" His face didn't change. "I mean, anything." I shrugged it off, thanked him, and got back on the road. But something about the way he looked at me, like he already knew I wasn't coming back, left a cold knot in my gut. An hour later, the snow was coming down so hard, my headlights barely cut through it. It was the kind of darkness that felt alive, shifting, pressing in on all sides. Then, through the swirling white, I saw something on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a person, a shape, standing motionless in the snow. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its body wrapped in something dark and tattered. Its head, if it even had one, was hidden by the storm. A trick of the light, I told myself. A tree, maybe. A road sign covered in snow. Then it moved. Not like a person. Not like anything I'd ever seen. It tilted, its body bending at an impossible angle, and then it lurched toward the road. Straight toward me. I slammed on the gas, heart hammering. The truck roared forward, tires slipping on the ice, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. But in my mirrors, I saw it. A shadow stretching through the storm, keeping pace with me. Not running, not walking, just gliding. And then, bang! The truck shuddered, something slamming against the side. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. The snow swirled harder, and the radio crackled to life. Not music, not static. A voice. Low, hollow, speaking my name. Paul. My blood ran cold. I reached for the radio dial, but as soon as I touched it, the voice started laughing, not like a person, like something trying to sound human and failing. I yanked my hand back, gripping the wheel. The laughter grew louder, and then the lights went out. My headlights flickered, then died. The dashboard went black. I was driving blind, barreling through a storm that swallowed everything, every trace of the world beyond the windshield. And somewhere outside, I knew it was still there, waiting. I grabbed my emergency flashlight, flicked it on, and shined it out the driver's side window. And I saw it, right next to my truck. Its face, if you can even call it a face. It was stretched, pulled too tight over a skull, too long, too thin. Its mouth was open, lips cracked and frozen, revealing rows of jagged teeth. And its eyes, black pits, sinking deep into its head. I screamed, and the thing screamed back, a sound so shrill, so full of hunger, my vision blurred with pain. Then, the truck hit something. The wheel jerked from my hands, and I went off the road. When I came to, I was buried. The truck was tilted, half sunken in the snow. The windshield was shattered, the wind howling through the cracks. I was bleeding. My leg was pinned. And outside, through the broken glass, I saw the snow shifting. It was still out there, moving, waiting. I fumbled for my radio, whispering, "Mayday, Mayday," but all I got was static. Then, the laughter came back. Not from the radio this time. From inside the truck. I turned my head, breath hitching, and it was there, crouched in the passenger seat. Too tall, too thin. Its head bent sideways to fit in the cab, grinning. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember passing out. All I remember is waking up in a hospital 3 days later with frostbite on my hands and a paramedic telling me they found me alone. No footprints in the snow, no other vehicles, just me, frozen in my truck, miles from the road. I quit driving after that. And every winter when the blizzards come, I remember that thing's face, that grin, and the way it whispered my name, like it's still waiting. It was supposed to be a simple winter getaway. Just a weekend in a rented cabin deep in the woods, away from the city, the noise, the stress. The snowstorm wasn't in the forecast, at least not when I booked the place. By the time I arrived, the wind had already picked up, thick flurries swirling in the air like ghosts. The cabin was small, old, isolated, but it had everything I needed: firewood, food, enough blankets to keep warm. There was no cell service, but that was part of the charm, a true escape. That first night, I settled in by the fire, sipping a cup of coffee, listening to the wind howl outside. It should have been peaceful, but there was something off, something wrong. It started with the knocking, soft at first. A rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the window. I froze. The cabin was miles from the nearest neighbor. No roads, no trails. No reason for anyone to be out here. I told myself it was the wind, a branch scraping against the glass. Then it came again. 3 knocks, closer. This time I stood up. My heart pounded as I crept to the window, pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the snow. Thick, endless, untouched. I let out a breath, feeling ridiculous. I was alone. There was no one out there. Still, I locked the door. The night stretched on, the fire crackling, the wind howling louder. I tried to sleep, but the unease sat heavy in my chest. Every creak of the cabin felt too deliberate, too unnatural. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Not at the window this time, at the door. Slow, deliberate. 3 perfectly spaced knocks. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the room. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was outside, or something. I grabbed the fireplace poker, inching toward the door. My hands were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at me to stay quiet, to pretend I wasn't there. Then, the handle turned, not rattling, not forced, just tested. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't in a hurry. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the poker tighter. The door was locked. It wouldn't open. Then, the knocking stopped. Silence. I stayed there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, waiting for another sound. Another sign. Nothing came. Eventually, exhausted, I climbed back into bed, still clutching the poker, and willed myself to sleep. When I woke, the cabin was silent. The storm had passed. And outside my window, footprints. Deep, distinct, leading from the tree line to my door. But no prints leading away. Whatever had been there the night before, it never left. I took the job because I needed the money. A seasonal caretaker for an old hunting lodge buried deep in the Montana wilderness. The pay was good, the isolation was expected, and I figured a few weeks in the snow wouldn't be so bad. I was wrong. The lodge itself was massive. 3 stories, a stone fireplace big enough to stand in, walls lined with mounted deer heads and dusty bookshelves. The owners only used it in the summer, so during the winter, it was just me. Me and the silence. The snowstorm hit on my 3rd night. It came fast, swallowing the landscape, turning the world into a swirling white void. I wasn't worried at first. I had supplies, a generator, and enough firewood to last a month. But then I started hearing things. It began with the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the old wood settling. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. They were real. Software. Slow. Moving through the halls. I checked the doors. All locked. The windows were shut tight. There was no way someone had gotten inside. Still, the footsteps continued. They would start upstairs near the empty bedrooms, then drift down the main hallway, stopping just outside the room where I sat. Then, silence. As if waiting. I searched the entire lodge. Every room, every closet. Nothing. But that night, I barely slept. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. A single wet footprint inside the house. Just one. Right in the center of the hallway. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I tracked in snow. Maybe I spilled water. But the shape was clear. Bare toes, an arch, a heel. Someone had been standing there, watching me. That night, the knocking started. Not on the doors, from inside the walls. It was soft at first. A faint, rhythmic tap, 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 behind the wooden panels. Then it grew louder, more insistent. A frantic knock, 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 like something trapped, something trying to get out. I pressed my ear against the wall, my breath shallow. There was nothing back there, just wood and insulation. But as I listened, the knocking shifted, moving, sliding down the length of the hallway. I followed it, step by step, until I reached the grand staircase. Then, silence. The hairs on my arms rose. And then, from the top of the stairs, a whisper, low, hoarse. It said my name. I ran. I locked myself in the study, built up the fire, and waited for daylight. The next morning, I packed my things. I didn't care about the job. I didn't care about the money. I just needed to leave. But when I opened the front door, I stopped cold. There were no footprints in the snow, not mine, not anyone else's, as if I had never been there at all. I didn't look back when I left. And sometimes, on quiet winter nights, I swear I still hear it. A slow, distant knock, 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 waiting for me to return. I had never feared the snow before. Growing up in a small town in northern Minnesota, blizzards were just a part of life. Whiteouts, icy roads, the way the wind howled through the trees at night, it was normal, expected. But that winter I learned that something else comes with the snow, something that doesn't belong. It happened when I was driving home from my girlfriend's house late at night. The storm had rolled in fast, thick flurries swallowing the road, my headlights barely cutting through the wall of white. Then I saw it, a figure standing on the side of the road. I barely had time to react before I was passing it, a person hunched against the wind, wearing only a thin dress, barefoot, their skin pale as the snow itself. I hit the brakes. My car skidded before stopping. My breath came fast. I checked my mirrors, expecting to see them there, waiting, but the road was empty. No footprints. No sign that anyone had ever been there. The thought of leaving them out in the storm made my stomach twist. What if they were real? What if they needed help? I put the car in reverse, my tires crunching through the snow. And then, thump! Something hit my trunk, hard. I spun around, heart hammering. The road was still empty. The storm raged on. But then I saw the handprint, pressed into the frost-covered glass of my rear window. A perfect outline. Too long, fingers too thin. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. Then slowly the fingers curled, dragging down the glass. I slammed the gas pedal, tearing down the road. My tires barely held traction, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I didn't look back again. I reached home shaking, stumbling inside, locking every door and window. The wind screamed outside, rattling the house, but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Then, sometime past 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You left me behind. I stared at the screen, cold terror gripping my chest. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly, "Let me in." A knock sounded at my front door. Software. Gentle. Like fingertips tapping against the wood. I didn't answer. The knocking continued for hours. A slow, steady rhythm that never stopped. Never grew impatient, just waited. By dawn, it was gone. There were no footprints in the snow. Just a single handprint on my front door. Long fingers, too thin, reaching for the handle. I never drove that road again. I was hired to clear snow from an old motel on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for years, sitting on the edge of a frozen lake, half buried under layers of ice and time. The owner wanted to sell it, but first, it needed to be cleaned up. That was my job: shovel the walkways, salt the steps, and make sure the place didn't collapse under the weight of the winter. It seemed simple enough. A few weeks of work, good pay, and no distractions. I figured the quiet would be a nice change. I was wrong. The first day was uneventful. Just me, my truck, and the endless stretch of white. The motel itself was eerie, though. It was a 2-story building, U-shaped, with a neon sign that had long since lost its glow. Inside, everything was frozen in time. All the rooms were still furnished, beds made, TVs unplugged but facing the empty chairs, as if the guests had just disappeared. The lobby was worse. Old coffee cups still sat on the counter. A newspaper from over a decade ago lay folded on the front desk. The air smelled stale, like dust and something faintly rotten. I worked until sundown, clearing snow from the entrance, making sure the pipes weren't frozen. By nightfall, I was exhausted. I locked the front doors, set up my cot in the manager's office, and tried to get some rest. But I couldn't sleep. The wind outside was relentless, rattling the windows like impatient fingers, tapping on the glass. I told myself it was just the storm, but something about the way the wind moved through the empty hallways made it sound like breathing. Sometime after midnight, I must have dozed off. because I woke up to a sound that turned my blood to ice. Footsteps. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The motel was old. Maybe the walls were just settling. But then I heard it again. A slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. Someone was inside the motel. I reached for my flashlight, my fingers trembling. The manager's office had a small glass window that looked out into the lobby. I turned my head, peering through the glass, and my stomach dropped. The front doors were still locked. No broken windows. No sign of forced entry. And yet, there were wet footprints leading across the tile. Footprints that hadn't been there before. My breath caught in my throat. The prints were fresh, glistening under the dim glow of the exit sign. They trailed from the entrance, right past where I'd been sleeping. My skin crawled. I should have left right then and there, but something in me needed to know. Needed to see. I stepped out of the office, following the footprints down the hallway. The air was thick, heavy, like I had stepped underwater. The prints stopped in front of one of the rooms, room 107. The door was open, just a crack. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn around. But against all logic, I reached for the handle. Before I could touch it, a sound came from inside. A whisper. Low, garbled. A voice that wasn't quite human. "You shouldn't be here." My stomach lurched. The voice was right next to my ear, as if something was standing inches from me, whispering straight into my skull. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. The beam flickered across the crack in the door, and for the briefest moment, I saw something staring back at me. Two hollow, sunken eyes, a mouth that was too wide, stretched into a grin that wasn't a grin at all. Then, the door slammed shut. I ran. I locked myself in the office, shoved the desk against the door, and waited. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. The whispering didn't stop. It moved outside the office, pacing the hallway, dragging along the walls. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I must have passed out. When I woke up, it was morning. The motel was silent. I forced myself to step out into the lobby, my whole body trembling. The footprints were gone. But room 107's door was wide open, and the bed inside. The bed was still warm, as if someone had just been lying there. I grabbed my things and left without looking back. The owner called me later, asking why I left so suddenly. I told him what happened, expecting him to laugh, to call me crazy. Instead, there was a long silence. Then, in a quiet, almost tired voice, he said, "You should have never opened a room 107. I swallowed hard. "Why?" "That's where they found him." I felt a chill creep down my spine. "Who?" "The last guest," the owner said. "The one who never checked out." I took a job as a winter caretaker for an isolated lodge deep in the mountains. The owners had shut it down for the season, but they needed someone to keep the place maintained, check the pipes, and ensure it didn't collapse under the weight of the snowfall. It seemed like easy money, seclusion, peace, and a break from everything. I thought I'd be alone, but I wasn't. The first few days were uneventful. The lodge was massive, with long, dim hallways and a grand lobby with a chandelier that swayed slightly whenever the wind howled outside. The rooms were all identical. Old wooden furniture, king-sized beds with thick quilts, and massive windows that looked out onto an endless stretch of snow. At night, the silence was overwhelming. No cars, no distant city sounds, just the groaning of the building and the occasional crack of ice shifting outside. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt watched. It started with small things. Doors I swore I had locked would be slightly ajar in the morning. Furniture seemed to shift ever so slightly, like someone had nudged it just enough to be noticed. My tools, flashlights, wrenches, even my snow shovel, wouldn't be where I left them. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being forgetful. Maybe I was letting the loneliness get to me. Then came the footprints. It was the third night when I found them. I had just finished checking the generator and was making my way back inside when I noticed tracks in the snow. Bare footprints. They led from the forest's edge all the way to the front door of the lodge. My stomach clenched. It was below freezing. No one could be out there barefoot, not without getting frostbite or worse. I followed the tracks with my flashlight, my breath fogging the air. They were deep, erratic, like someone had stumbled through the snow. But there was something else. The prints stopped at the door. No return tracks, nothing leading away, as if whoever made them had entered the lodge, but never left. I swallowed hard, turned the knob, and stepped inside, locking the door behind me. The lodge was silent, but the air felt wrong, like something had shifted. I did a quick sweep of the place, checking every room, every hallway. Nothing. No sign of an intruder. No melting footprints on the hardwood floors. But as I turned to head back to my room, I saw it. A single wet footprint at the top of the stairs. My breath caught. Then another. Leading down the hall. To my room. I didn't want to follow. Every part of me screamed to turn around, to run, to leave the lodge and never come back. But I had nowhere else to go. Slowly, I stepped forward, following the trail. The door to my room was open. Inside, the window was wide open, curtains billowing in the freezing wind. My bed was still made, my things untouched. But something was off. Then I saw it. The mirror above my dresser. The glass was covered in frost, as if someone had breathed on it. And in that frost, a message. Let me in. My body went cold. I slammed the window shut, my hands shaking. My breath came fast, ragged. I checked the closet, the bathroom, everywhere. No one was there. But I didn't sleep that night. The wind outside never stopped. The walls creaked like something was pressing against them, shifting just out of sight and sometime past midnight. The whispering started. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember how long it went on. But when I woke up, everything was still. Except for my door, it was unlocked. The footprints were gone, and on the mirror, the message had changed. See you soon. I left that morning. Never went back. The owner called a few weeks later, saying the next caretaker had quit too. When I asked why, there was a long silence. Then, in a hushed voice, he said, he wouldn't say. But he left in the middle of the night. Said he wasn't alone.